Okay, today is March 24th, 2014. This is Forensic Interview of Children. We're going over the midterm examination. We're on campus with the on-campus students, and the exam was precisely the same for the online students. So this is an opportunity for you online folks to go over the exam and see what the correct responses were, and more importantly, the explanations. The first question was, the interviewer says to the 6-year-old, "Do you recall what Danny was doing to Carla in the toy room?" Now, you may remember that was a multiple choice question. The correct answer was, the phrase, "Do you recall," is surplusage and adds nothing to the inquiry. It's unnecessary and potentially confusing. And that answers the question, what is the main linguistic problem with this sentence construction? And Professor Walker, in her book on children and language, your second textbook, addresses this in some degree of detail. She calls them DURs, D-U-Rs. Do you recall? Do you remember? Daniel, only if you remember. Where did Grandma live when she was running for freeholder? No point in asking Daniel if you remember. Simply say, Daniel, where did Grandma live when she was running for freeholder? Either he knows or doesn't know. And the problem is that beginning of the sentence, that clause at the beginning of the sentence, can confuse children, especially the smaller children, because they can look at the word forget or the process of forgetting in a bunch of different ways, and Professor Walker addresses them in some detail. So forget about do you remembers, do you recall, if you remember. Get rid of it. Not good. We call it in the law surplusage. Extra stuff that you don't need. And more importantly, can create confusion. Peggy, did you have a question? I thought I saw you raise your hand. Question 2. By age 4, children can provide a meaningful explanation of why a person acted a certain way. Now, don't answer that, class. And we all know what the answer is. It's on the board, and we're looking at it on the big screen for the online students. But you know, these questions about what the capabilities of children are, what their strengths are, what their abilities are, sometimes you got to forget everything you learn here, right? And just be logical. And I don't know that anyone in this class got this one wrong, but if you did, and there's another one about kids 5 and 6 about their ability to deliver a narrative. You know, and sometimes you just got to forget everything you learn here and say, hey, man, if I was standing across from a 4-year-old, would they be able to tell me why mommy did this or why daddy did that? Would they be able to explain another person's motives? No, that's hard enough to explain why they did something, why they spilled the milk, why they engaged in some behavior. Why is a very tricky question and problematic in child maltreatment investigations. It also has the baggage of being accusatory in certain contexts. You want to be careful with why, especially when you're dealing with adolescents and teens and those who may think you are judging their behavior. When you say, you know, well, why did you go upstairs with the frat guys? Is there a reason you went upstairs with the frat guys? We recommend saying, is there a reason, rather than why. Sometimes you may need to know the answer to that. You know, I think I may have shared an example with you students when I was teaching the why issue. I'm not sure if it was this group or not, but there was a little girl, 8-year-old girl, who was molested by the teacher who was in charge of the chess club in one of the schools in Passaic County. And the next semester, or whatever the breakdown of offerings are in the middle school that she attended, chess was offered again. And she signed up for chess again. So that is an important question. An investigator needs to go, you know, and she reported that the first time she was in that chess club after school, after everyone left, the professor shut the door and he fondled her, and the teacher shut the door and fondled her. Then when it's over, come January, she signs up for, we'll call it Chess 2, or After School Club Chess 2. So we needed to know that. So one way to avoid the accusatory nature of why, you know, the investigator said, you know, Danielle, you said that Mr. Jones did this to you in the September semester. Is there a reason why you signed up for chess again with Mr. Jones in the January semester? And we asked that. And that, you know, jurors might want to know that. You got a right to know that if you're doing an investigation. You got a right to evaluate logic, right? Sometimes kids aren't telling the truth. Sometimes they are telling some of the truth and not the whole truth. And sometimes they're just plain confused. She may have said, Oh, you know what? I had to sign up for both of them at the beginning of the year, and I didn't want to quit. Right? So the why question sometimes is necessary. The way we ask it matters, especially with older kids, and especially in the context where it could be accusatory. Right? Usually people get the message that we're judging them. We ask them, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? You know, all of us were children at one time, right? If your parents ask you a why question, you think, you're like, well, come on, Ma, you know, because I wanted to take that class or something. So why can be very judgmental. One way to finesse your way around that is to say, is there a reason instead of why? Or what was the reason or something like that. Does that eliminate the stigma of the why question or the judgment aspect of the why question completely? No. But what it does do is kind of soften it a little bit. Does that make sense? All right. Here we're worried about 4-year-olds. We're not worried about judging here. We're worried about, you know, whether a third person acted in a certain way. And little kids don't have enough experience to evaluate the motivations of third parties. What's something else that would make it nearly impossible for most 4-year-olds, not most, because you acquire this at about age 3 or 4, but many 4-year-olds, what kind of aspect of their personality at that age might make it difficult, if not impossible, for a 4-year-old to explain the motives of another or the behavior of a third party?
Because they're egocentric.
Rock on. Perfect. They're egocentric. And egocentricity, in part, means the little one thinks the whole world revolves around them. You know, and if mom did something or dad did something or the babysitter did something, it had to do because I wanted it done or it had something to do with me. They filter the whole world through their own experience. So it's difficult for them to explain why a person acted in any way at all because they don't notice the motives of third parties when they're 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 years old because of cognitive egocentricity. Very good. Question 3, I believe here. Constant correction when a child makes errors of grammar or sentence structure is very helpful in the process of a youngster's language development. Now, it's a very attractive question. You want to jump on it right away and go, oh yeah, we got to help kids learn, right? We got to teach them. When they make a mistake, we correct them. But if you look in Walker's book, it's not helpful. And even if you didn't know the answer, and even if you skipped over Walker's section in your book, one of the tips I gave you guys, I'm not so sure I gave it to you online, folks. Go ahead, Peg.
It was on the video.
What was on the video?
That answer.
Constant correction. Good, good. So it was on the video as well. But even if you didn't watch the video, too, I said to you guys, anytime you see a true or false question, right, if there are superlatives or definitives, always this happens, never, children never do this, children always do that, it's almost always false, right, because very few things in life are always or never. This isn't quite that, but it kind of leans towards false, right? What are the words there that are high-powered, definitive kind of words that suggest that it's probably false, without even knowing the answer? Give me the first word. Constant. Doing something all the time is one of these always things, right? It's a little bit, it's dressed in a different way from always and never. Constant correction. I don't know about constant. There's another word in there, too. It's a bit of a definitive. Not quite. It's not always, but
Very helpful.
very helpful. Excellent. Very helpful. Excuse me, it's very helpful. That's pushing it a little bit when professors use language like that. Anyway, the substantive answer is false. It's not helpful or of little help to children to constantly correct their errors of grammar. And the reason is, in part, the answer to a question that's coming up. Kids acquire language through their environment, right? Through a natural interaction of their environment, their relationship with their family, what's in the room when a question is asked, right? So you don't learn language by mimicking, and you don't learn language by parents and grown-ups telling you the right way to do things all the time. There are quite a number of question constructions that you would say that's not proper English. And someone might say to you, why? And you go, I don't know why, it just doesn't sound right. Well, when things don't sound right, they're probably wrong. You're probably right when you make that observation. You may not be able to explain why linguistically, But you're probably right. It is wrong. And the reason is because we learn language as a very interactive process. We don't learn it as a table of rules. And this question speaks to like the table of rules method, and that's not the way kids learn. Sexual play can be a natural and healthy process in children, including toddlers. Now, this is one that people, you want to jump on right away and go, that's outrageous. But if you go back to Professor Rich's article and think about it and remember the discussions we had in class, the answer is true. Sexual play can be natural and healthy, even in toddlers. I mean, infants touch their private parts sometimes if they discover them, because it feels good. There's another question later that kind of gets into this a little bit more, but that is true. Between 3 and 4 years old, children can relate clock time to their schedule. Now, forget about everything you learned in his class, forget about Professor Walker's book. Sit down across from a 3-year-old and look them in the eye, in your imagination, of course, and say to yourself, this kid can relate clock time to their schedule. Do you think that's common among 3-year-olds? Nah. Now, that is a higher level cognitive event in a child's development that comes a little later on. And of course, there's great variability. I mean, there were 4-year-old chess masters. I'm not saying it can't happen. It could happen. But it's quite rare, and it's generally not something that's 3 and 4-year-olds are capable of. And why do we ask a question like this? Because in investigative interviews and forensic interviews, we're concerned about such things, right? When something happened is relevant. It's relevant in the criminal context, it's relevant in the civil context, and it's certainly relevant in the child protection context. Here we get into a little bit more sex and children. Sexually specific comments, aggressive sexual play with other children, and constant masturbation are all examples of the natural, healthy process of growing up. Now, I don't know anyone who got that one wrong, and if you looked at this one, you should go back and look at the other one and make sure that one was true, because they're kind of polar opposites, right? This is as bad as it gets. This is a sign that something is wrong here, right? Sexually specific comments, aggressive sexual play. You got this definitive in there too. What's the definitive? Constant. Thank you. Constant masturbation. That's false. Children's meaningful linguistic competence develops by, how do kids acquire language, right? How do they become confident with language? That's exactly what that question means, right? Children's meaningful linguistic competence develops by watching television? No. Reading books? No. Mimicking adults? No. And interaction among their environment, natural ability, and experience? Yes. And Professor Walker talks about that in the book. I talked about it. It was in the PowerPoints. And if you think about it, it makes sense. That's not to say by watching television that watching television doesn't influence language acquisition. It does. Less than you think, believe it or not. And reading books is very important in language acquisition, okay? But none of these are the only thing that contributes to language acquisition, and not even the most important things. And mimicking adults is probably last on the list, although it happens, and it's part of it. But it's also about watching TV, reading books, mimicking adults in a place, in a certain time, in a room where there's a TV and a remote, and there's a mom and a dad and a brother and a sister talking, interacting, lifting the remote control at the same time where the child's asked, do you want to watch a different television program? Maybe the kid starts to learn the word program now. Program. No, you can tell them program means something that's on television at a particular time. You can say that till you're blue in the face. But if the child hears, do you want to put on a different television program, and at the same time the remote is lifted, the channel is changed, her sister yells out, I don't like this program. All that stuff is happening in the environment that the kid is living in, right? And their natural ability, their environment, and the experience of living that clicking and that event develops linguistic competence. Does that make sense? No? Any questions up to where we are so far? No. Tara Lee didn't sneak in, did she? When it comes to inconsistency among children, deliberate falsehood is not the most likely explanation. Among young children, inconsistency is normal. True or false? It is true. And that's real important, especially for advocates and lawyers. May I borrow your book? Because the life's blood of defense lawyers is pointing out inconsistencies from witnesses. So when a witness takes the stand, a typical cross-examination strategy is to point out, well, didn't you say this when you testified in front of the grand jury? And then later when you wrote your report, you said something differently, right? So they look for inconsistencies. But with little kids, inconsistencies is part of being a little kid. So, that needs to be explained sometimes, and it certainly needs to be understood by the people questioning them. Because we do credibility judging all the time when we're interviewing kids, right? Where we're going with this case, how we're going to speak to this child in the future, whether we're going to look for additional evidence, may all rely upon whether we believe this kid, right? So if right away we're going, hey, this kid's all over the map, man. Well, maybe the kid's all over the map, not because they're lying, but because of other issues. And in fact, the reason I asked for your book is, number 6 says, why are there inconsistencies in children's testimony? It's right on the back of the book. Professor Walker addresses linguistic reasons why kids might be inconsistent. Thank you. That's not the only reason why kids might be inconsistent. There are a variety of them. But inconsistency alone, kids get a pass on. You need to try to size it up. Now, sometimes kids are inconsistent because they're lying, or they're confused, or mistaken. But sometimes it's just because the question was asked differently from one interviewer to the next. Boxers and briefs. Remember we watched Clinton talk about boxers and briefs? The understanding of the difference between those two pairs of underwear could make Clinton look confused or like he's changing his testimony, when in fact 2 different interviewers may have used 2 different terms for the same pair of undergarments. By the age of 5 or 6, nearly all children can provide highly detailed narratives describing the circumstances surrounding an event. This is another one of those where I say, put everything you learned away. Sit down eye to eye across from a 5-year-old and think about whether that child can give you a highly detailed narrative describing the circumstances of an event. And the answer to that is false. Again, you got those buzzwords there, right? Highly detailed narratives, right? Describing the circumstances. Nearly all. Can some kids give you a good accounting of something that happened in the past at age 5? Sure. But nearly all of them? The opposite's true. We have forensic interviewers in Passaic County, Essex has one, and some other counties do, and many counties use detectives. You guys are all forensic interviewers. In a sense, if you're in intake, you're interviewing kids a lot. From your experience, when you catch a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, it's but you're not doing a big dance and clicking your heels, right? We got one with a 3.5-year-old, Not that those kids don't deserve justice. Peggy's happy when they get a 3-year-old. She loves interviewing those 3-year-olds. And they could be fun. And if you look at it as a challenge... I like writing about them. If you look at it as a challenge, it could be fun. But they're difficult. They're challenging, They're really challenging. Franz Anton Mesmer was a famous in 18th century France for curing both adults and children's ailments. When a special commission was created to examine the legitimacy of Mesmer's magnetism ceremonies, they concluded that the patient's responses were the product of, and nearly all of you selected hypnosis or hypnotism. And that was among the correct answers, and I accepted that. The preferred answer, the one that I liked better, was suggestibility or suggestion, because that's what we were studying, But hypnosis works. Everybody got a point for that, and that's what was happening. But we didn't know it was hypnosis at the time. We didn't know what the hell he was doing, And he was the term hypnosis didn't come into being until well after Mesmer.
Wait,
But it's the correct answer, so
No,
don't
mine
sweat it.
didn't have multiple choice. I didn't know there was a multiple choice.
It wasn't, but the computer, I made a computer version, so if the student online typed in hypnotism, it would say correct.
Oh.
So those were acceptable correct answers you're looking at. Wasn't multiple choice. It was blank. It was a line there. Well, this is that maxim we repeated over and over again. Questions for preschoolers should be blank and blank, not blank and blank. Somebody that got it right, tell us the answer.
Simple and concrete.
Right, not?
Not complex and abstract.
Excellent. Select the sentence that is in the passive voice and may present difficulty for a child. Now, I didn't hit you over the head with the answer here. I made it a little bit, I don't want to say tricky, but a little bit complex in the sense that the correct answer was option 3 in the one we're looking at. During the assault, Cleo was rubbed by John. Remember, the passive voice is when the person doing the action, the agent, the person doing something, is at the end of the sentence. And the person who is the object of the action is at the beginning of the sentence. Excuse me, but I added an introductory phrase, during the assault.
So this implies that Cleo may have done something wrong.
Well, what can be potentially confusing for little kids who haven't really, don't really understand the passive voice yet, preschoolers especially,
Cleo did the wrong.
yeah, they think Cleo's doing the rubbing here, and that's why it's a problem. You don't have that problem in any other one of those sentences, right? Gabriel carried the pail into the basement. That is the active voice. That's a good way to write. Anthony and Sam held the door firmly shut. Again, that's in the active voice. Now, it has a compound subject, but so what? It's still an active voice. Martha's son David scratched Lucinda on her back. Now you have an adjective introducing David at the beginning as Martha's son, but it still doesn't make it passive voice. David scratches Lucinda. That's in the active voice. Adolescents may have the language skills of school-age children if they are born in certain parts of New Hampshire, right? You can scratch that out right away. If they're undereducated, prone to play violent video games, underparented, unattached, developmentally disabled, all of the above, answers 2, 4, 5, and 6, answers 3, 5, and 6. And when it comes to test taking, unless it's a really devious professor, and that's not me. You may think so, but I don't feel I am. And they have answers like all the above and then selected responses, 2, 4, 5, 3, 6. It's going to be one of those, right? Why would a professor go out of their way to make this collection of responses at the bottom unless, one, they're devious and really want to trick you and prevent you from using test-taking strategies rather than knowing it, or the correct answer is among those. So with me, you can always rest assured it's one of these. It's not simple one or the other. Now, one of you circled all of them and then circled the correct answer. But you got the points for that. Even though that was a little confusing for me as to what you were saying. But I think I knew what you were saying. You didn't circle born in certain parts of New Hampshire. Whoever you were, truly don't remember. So if you circled born in certain parts of New Hampshire, I will meet with you after class and we talk about that. I don't know, North New Hampshire, South New Hampshire, perhaps around the Capitol building. I'm not sure. Maybe on the Atlantic Ocean, the beach people are a little more difficult. I saw Randy and Arthur touching each other. He had a big one. The word that creates ambiguity in the preceding sentence is the personal pronoun and blank. Now, there are 2 personal pronouns in that sentence. Someone tell me what they are. Personal pronoun means a pronoun that's a pronoun and it's a substitute for a person. He, and what's the other one? I. I's a pronoun and he's a pronoun. Well, the one that creates ambiguity in the sentence is which one? He. Now, I is the speaker, or the writer, or the report writer, so that's not the problem. And you know, at the end of the sentence, it doesn't create confusion. The concern here is, you know, who has the big whatever. He had a big one. We don't know if it's Randy or Arthur, because he's a personal pronoun. It's the male personal pronoun. And, you know, Randy could be a girl's name, so could Arthur, I guess. I don't know. But it creates a problem whatever the gender is. When asked, "Where is the jury?" 5-year-old Amanda said, "In a box on Mommy's dresser. She has earrings, rings, and bracelets." Now, you guys are experts. You probably are national experts on these kind of errors among children. We went over these so many times. I forget who it is, the young lady who, she's not here, is she? Who was I helping with was sitting here? Was that you?
Hope.
No. Oh, Hope. Yeah. Hope and I went over this here. We went over it in the hallway. What is the error? Oh, it's up there. Auditory discrimination error, right?
Mm-hmm.
Auditory discrimination error. The other one is homonym. The best way to differentiate between a homonym and audio discrimination error is if the words are pronounced the same, you got a homonym problem, not an auditory discrimination error. It's a homonym problem. Jury and jewelry, the correct pronunciations, are not the same. They sound similar, and it's creating an error. And the kids mixing them up. Think about the term. It sounds fancy, right? Auditory. What does auditory mean? Hearing. So we know the first word is something to do with hearing. Kids are hearing something. Discrimination. Okay? What does discrimination mean? Not in a sense, well, the same sense. If you discriminate against somebody, if you go to the coffee shop and they won't serve Del Russo because he's wearing a tie, we can say, hey, the barista is discriminating against people with ties, right? So that's a form of discrimination. But looking at the term generically or generally, discrimination means the ability to separate or treat things one different from the other. Okay? And auditory discrimination has something to do with hearing, we established that, and separating things, discriminating among a large group, right? So auditory discrimination, error, of course, is a mistake. So when you have jewelry and jury, the process that's happening here is, as described by linguists, is they're unable to use their hearing to discriminate between two words, to figure out the difference between two words and what they mean. And in the case of auditory discrimination errors, they don't sound exactly the same. That would be a homonym. Draw. You can draw on the paper, or you can draw the blinds, right? Does someone here watch television programming? Downton Abbey is a program on Channel 13, and it seems like it could be the most boring show in the world, but it's a turbocharged soap opera from England where they follow the lives of the people who are the staff, the valet and the footmen and the butlers and the people who work for the rich earls and dukes in England, and then they follow the lives of the dukes and earls and the fancy aristocracy in England. And they're constantly going after dinner to the drawing room. So I'm like, what's the drawing room? You know, after dinner, they get changed 3 or 4 times a day. The show's really good, though. It seems boring, but it has more in common with, I don't know, what's Young and the Restless. Like, they have soap operas anymore?
Yeah.
General Hospital?
Yeah.
It has more in common with General Hospital than it does with, anything else. But apparently, after dinner in England, people would withdraw to another room so the staff can come and clean up, and then they would serve dessert. So they go in this. I thought it was where like draftsmen worked and they drew stuff and made blueprints and things. But it's a place to retire to withdraw to, and go somewhere else. Well, that would be another example of a homonym. The drawing is an adjective that describes a particular kind of room in Victorian England. It's the ability to write on a piece of paper. It can also bring up the blinds when you draw the blinds. But it is pronounced the same in all 3 instances, right? Draw. Not drank, and the kids confusing drank with draw. That would be auditory discrimination error. Now, the Sam Stone study demonstrated the suggestibility dynamic of, if you said suggestibility, I gave you half a point. If you said, someone said, and I was really good, I hadn't considered it, and it wasn't among the answers, but I gave you full credit for it. And what the heck was it? Well, the thing that I was interested in was stereotype induction, okay? I mean, that was one of the main, if not the main thing that the researchers studied. They talked about Sam Stone many times before he came to class, and they emphasized that he was clumsy and oafish and prone to break things and knock things over. The major lesson from Sam Stone's study is stereotyping. When you stereotype a person before a kid is interviewed about that person, and if you stereotype them negatively, the kids are more likely to answer in a way that paints the person in a negative light. We talked about it in Margaret Kelly Michaels. She's bad. You know, the other kids told us, and we're going to put her in jail. Don't you want to make sure Kelly Michaels goes to jail? She won't hurt kids anymore. If you start out by telling a kid all that stuff before you interview the child, they're more likely to say something negative about Kelly Michaels. If there's, it's a close call whether Kelly Michaels did something bad, the kid's more likely to go, oh yeah, she did it. Because we prime them, if you will. So the major thing they were studying in Sam Stone was stereotype induction. Was that a case about suggestibility? Yeah. Remember, they spent, I think, 16 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever questioning the kids over and over and over again. And in the first interviews, nobody blamed Sam Stone. Maybe one or two, but very few people. It wasn't until they interviewed them over and over again. And part of the reason why those kids said, and he ripped a book and he threw it in the air, and was suggestibility. It was certainly suggestibility was part of that experiment. But I used the word in the question, so it's unlikely that's the response I'm looking for. But I gave you half a point for that. Did somebody got a full point but didn't say stereotype in this class?
I don't know if I got a full point, but I put source misattribution.
Yeah, I gave you a full point. And this is an excellent example of source misattribution. That's the one I was thinking of. Thank you. It's not among the correct responses. If you put that, I gave you full credit, and I gave you full credit, because that is. In fact, I used it in the hallway when we were heading over there. Remember, I said, think of little Billy. But I'm sorry, that's not Sam Stone. That's the mousetrap study. I'm getting my studies confused. So is there source misattribution in this one study? I'm going to have to take that point back. I'm not going to take it back from you. Kids say Sam Stone ripped the book and got chocolate syrup on the teddy bear. They think that they saw it happen, but they really didn't. It was simply suggested to them. Yes, that is source misattribution. Rock on.
What's the other source for?
Source monitoring and source misattribution. None of them have come up yet. He just happened to, hit on it because it's in that study, although not the answer I was looking for. But if you gave it, you got full credit. And if you said suggestive or suggestibility, you got half credit. Here's our friend Margaret Kelly Michaels. Her case was a decision by the New Jersey Supreme Court that introduced the idea that investigative interviews of children can sometimes produce unreliable testimony. That is true. An understatement, but true. Very true. Children older than 11 are typically no more suggestible than adults. True. I said that many times. The mousetrap study provided an example of how repeated questioning and suggestions to visualize events, the picture in the head game, could produce a false memory. True. And we beat that mousetrap study to death. So, most of the research that followed the Kelly Michaels case, predominantly the work of Stephen Ceci and colleagues, involved intrafamilial abuse, with older children, and provide significant lessons in how to avoid influencing children's recollections. Now, if you characterize Del Russo as a little devious, and that's my adjective, a little bit devious here, If I was devious at all, and any questions, I could be accused of being a little devious here.
The older children.
Well, the answer is false, but none of the studies involved older children, and Sam Stone, you know, they didn't involve intrafamilial cases either. And we looked at that, it's in the PowerPoints, and in fact, we spent some time differentiating all of the research that followed the Kelly Michaels case by Cece, and the cases that we deal with. I mean, I made that clear, and that's important to know, too, because if somebody wants to use these CC studies, you got to say, listen, our kids have already made a disclosure. These kids never made disclosures. Remember me saying they have no loyalty to Sam Stone. They don't care what happens to Sam Stone, you know, or the clown. Nobody cares about these people. Our cases are intrafamilial cases, right? They're cases where people don't want to get daddy in trouble or get mommy in trouble. So Steve and Cece's studies did not involve intrafamilial abuse, and they certainly didn't involve older children. They not almost, all of them were with 7 and under, and most of them were with preschoolers. I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah.
I put false here, but you marked it wrong. I think you may have marked it wrong because you couldn't tell which one I was picking.
Oh, yes, I did mark that one wrong. Not because it's wrong, but I want to hear your explanation of how I'm supposed to know which one you're picking, and I will give you full credit. May I come over there?
I should.
May I approach the witness?
Say a little bit
I'm going to get your
more.
peers. Your all peers are all going to rule in favor of you, and that's okay, but I just want to see if they agree.
But the egg, the middle of the egg is.
Don't move on there, you're tampering with the evidence. The little circle in the middle was not there. I'm going to give you full credit.
I see that.
But I want to hear your thing. I'm going to give you full credit no matter what.
I should have wrote it out. I should have wrote it out.
Look at the palette you have here. You could have wrote it in. Yeah. So anyway, how am I supposed to know which one's which?
Because the middle of the egg is clearly inside of this circle here. And then the extensions just go into the hole.
All right. I'm giving you full credit. I just want to. Nobody's gonna tell you.
I don't know what you think you're talking about. Honestly.
I would say that
She did this. She did that. Then she did an X.
she X'd out into true and made
The true is the one you wanted X'd out, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because the answer's false.
I would say.
I will agree that most of the X is in the true
We'll
circle.
give a point too.
Whatever happens next time, put your initials next to where you did.
But that's a little.
Actually, you can
I
write
know
it.
you're taking an exam and I may
Right.
take in your head, but how am I? Come on.
You're right, Professor. I agree with you too.
Oh, yeah.
Change one to coffee.
I'm hungry.
I do. You have to remind me that, okay, Jennifer? But I want to make sure. I did not give you. Did you count all these?
Yeah. So it was
One.
really a 22.
I don't know. Let's see. One.
Yeah.
You mind if I look at this in front of everybody here? Yeah, it should be. You were the one here too with this.
Yeah, I told you that. You know what it is? Because I go so fast. That's my problem with taking tests and don't read through the whole thing because
That's
I think I
what you're
know.
supposed to do. You think you know it.
Exactly.
You should read it all the way.
Two. 2.5.
Yeah.
So I gave you that one wrong. Let's say 2.5. So you should have gotten 20,
One.
23, 2.5, 23.5. I gave you 22.5. Oh, there must be another one wrong here. No, too many ones.
You're lying.
Hold on.
Maybe I'll let you do
That's what go to stuff.
You got one wrong. This is wrong, right? So I agree with you. Minus 1. This is correct. So let's read it like this. This is correct. The answer's false, right? So minus 1, minus 0.5, and that's it. So you take away 121.1.5, should give you what?
23.5.
23.5. So everybody gets a 1.5. You messed up the curve.
No. Oh, hell no.
I'm not gonna.
Oh, hell no.
So email me to give you 25, okay? I'm not giving you 25.5.
That was false.
She did mess up the curve though, but I'm not gonna hold it against you.
Thank you.
And congratulations, she got the highest grade in the class. Now, do you all agree with the X coming a little bit in a circle now? Everybody on her boat?
23.5. So.
Hello, let's just say thank you for the curve.
Thank you for the curve. And you know what? First of all, she didn't hurt anybody. You got perfect scores.
No,
So
she got the 2.
we got the 2 points, and she got a 23.5. So we're all good. Everybody did good. The type of memory that requires exposure to a cue.
Wait, what's the question?
We're on this question here. This type of memory requires exposure to a cue. For example, a word, a picture, an object. It's recognition memory, okay? Nah, some of you put recall. It's not recall. Recall memory is that amount of memory you can deliver without any cues or prompts. Tell me what happened. What happened next? What happened yesterday? What happened? Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened when you crashed into the toll booth on the way to school. Okay? That's recognition memory. That would be recognition memory because there's a lot of tell me what happened when your car crashed into the toll booth on the way to school. There's a lot of information in there to cue you, to help you remember what the hell we're talking about here, right? Car, crash, toll booth, so recognition memory, not recall memory. Free recall is that amount of memory that you can produce without any cues or prompts. And I suggest that you focus on the word recognize. Something that you recognize jogs your memory. Recognition memory is almost always in process when you take a victim to the scene of the crime. We talked about that because the presence at the scene of the crime, exposure to that scene can jog memory and tap into recognition memory. A young child's inability to see the world and events from another's perspective is known as, and nearly all of you, if not all of you, got egocentricity in some form. Good job. That is on campus, folks. I don't remember the online. When a child erroneously reports having experienced an event, when it was merely repeatedly suggested to them, it is known as, that is source misattribution. Some of you said suggestibility. Excuse me. I either gave you half a point or a point. I don't remember. And the word suggested is in the question, so it's not likely that's what I'm asking about. But that's why I mark on the curve. To the extent that these kind of questions are a little bit confusing and maybe I should fix them, that's why you get the 2 points. That's the great equalizer, you know. And for my online students, you guys got 4 points on the curve. So you had a significant benefit from the curve. And it's fair, and I'm happy to do it. The younger the child, the faster the rate of forgetting. True. It's just a simple fact of child development. We talked about it in class. It's in Walker's book and in the book by Fowler. 6-year-old Eileen is one of my favorite questions. Not so much because it's a law enforcement type question, but I think this is another question that logic can give us the answer. But certainly if you've been in this class all semester, you should know the answer right away. And if you're in child protection, and you interview kids regularly, it should jump out at you, the answer. But it could be a little tricky if you don't pay attention to the words used and the developmental levels of children. 6-year-old Eileen described the perpetrator as really big. I'll even say she was emphatic about it. He was really big. She also reported it was a man who spoke loudly, and he was tall. Based upon this description, the police should be looking for a teenage boy, a young man, or an adult, and rule out any children under 13. True or false? False. And I think all you know that. I mean, to a 6-year-old, really big could be a lanky 9-year-old, right? And so on. So that's not, you don't want to rule them out. The reason there's this question is this relates to what Walker calls comparatives. Remember the girl that Fran was interviewing when we watched a little clip and she goes, Julio's tall. When they were trying to figure out how tall somebody was and she was holding her hand over her head. And that's what this question's about, that lesson. Any questions overall about the midterm exam?